most of the language development stuff that we're talking about deals with comparing molecules and communicating about molecules. I'm talking about this molecule and not that one. And so a big part of that is communicating differences between molecules, or even determining whether two molecules are different or not. So take these two molecules. Let's compare them. They have the same atoms, so they're at least isomers, if nothing else. But they also have the same connectivity, right? In both we say, you know, it's got a carbon on the end connected to a nitrogen, connected to a carbon, connected to a carbon, and so forth. So they have the same connectivity and all the same bonds. There's no kind of bond that shows up in one and not the other. These two are mirror images of each other. But I can't actually take one of them and make it look like the other. So even though they're mirror images, they're different than each other. Again, applying this to kind of everyday life. A baseball bat, there's no such thing as a left-handed or a right-handed baseball bat, right? It's this kind of round thing. You hit baseballs with it. It's the same whether you're right or left. Some people are switch hitters, and they'll use the same bat to go from both sides of the plate. But baseball gloves are left-handed or right-handed, right? They either fit on one hand or the other. If I were to compare a left-handed and a right-handed glove, they would be mirror images of each other, but they wouldn't be the same. There's no way I can kind of twist, rotate, etc., one of the baseball gloves to make it look like the other. These molecules are like that. They're mirror images of each other, but they're not superimposable. I can't twist one and make it look like the other. We're going to call this property chirality. Chirality, from the Greek for hand, so it's handedness. Some three-dimensional molecules have handedness where they are not superimposable on their mirror image. So these molecules are chiral because they're mirror images of each other, but they are not superimposable. So each of them are chiral. And we'd call the relationship between them enantiomerism, I guess. They are enantiomers of each other. Okay, so molecules that are enantiomers of each other are mirror images of each other, but they're not the same. Like a right-handed baseball glove and a left-handed baseball glove are enantiomers of each other. Mirror images, but not the same. Why is this important? Why should we care about this? The molecule on the right is called duloxetine, or Cymbalta. It is a very important treatment for major depressive disorder. The molecule on the left is not. The molecule on the right is twice as effective as the molecule on the left in treating this disorder. So how should we think about this? Well, again, your body is chiral. And so you can think about every nook and cranny, every receptor in your body, just about, is also chiral, right? So you can think of your body's insides as like lots of mittens or something, lots of like right-handed and left-handed gloves, right? And as hands go through the system, they're going to fit into some of those gloves better than others. So when we think about a drug has to bind to some enzyme or some receptor. And those enzymes and receptors are chiral. And so one enantiomer is going to fit into that pocket better than the other. So compounds with enantiomers are chiral. Achiral compounds do not have enantiomers. So another way to say that is achiral compounds are superimposable on their mirror images. Let's practice drawing tetrahedrons and seeing whether things are the same or different. So the pro tip for drawing tetrahedrons is you want to draw two bonds in the plane going one direction, and then two bonds out of the plane, back and forth, or going at you and going away from you, going the other direction. Don't draw it like this, where I've got a wedge going down and a dashed line going up, or vice versa. It's kind of hard to picture how exactly that would work. This is a bad drawing of perspective, so don't do it like this. Again, two atoms in the plane, usually going one direction, down, left, whatever, and then two out of the plane that are really, these are actually eclipsed with each other. So if you notice that here I've got the wedge slightly to the left, here I've got the wedge slightly to the right, that doesn't matter. Those are the same because, again, those two are really just on top of each other, so it's not like to the left or to the right. So you can ignore that. Okay, so are these, any of them, the same as this? So let's start with this compound. If I rotate it, just flip it 180 degrees so that bromine is to the left, notice that if I did that here, my chlorine would also swing from the back to the front. But here, that hasn't happened. So I'm only switching two things, but not these two, so those can't be the same. Here, notice that my F and the Br are in the same place, but my H and my Cl have switched places. That can't be, right? I can't keep two things fixed and change the other two. And here, notice that I've got chlorine and bromine looking the same, but my hydrogen and my fluorine have switched. So none of these three are these things. However, these are all the same as each other, right? So if I flip this, yes, my H and my Cl should flip, so these two are the same. And again, I can convince you that if I rotate this, I will get to that. Let me use this animation to convince you that all of these drawings are of the same thing. So I'll start with this drawing, and then I can simply rotate it to give the second one. And then I can rotate it again to give the third one. Okay, so how can you do this without a model kit, virtual or otherwise? Well, one way I like to look at is if I switch any two between these, I need to switch the other two. So here, if I switch these two, going from the one to the other, I also need to switch those two, right? So if I switch any pair and then I switch any other pair, then I'm good, okay? And so here, I can think about this in a couple different ways. I can say, okay, I'm going to switch chlorine and bromine, then I'm going to switch hydrogen and fluorine. Again, great. I could also say I'm going to switch hydrogen and chlorine and then chlorine and fluorine or something, some kind of round robin thing. Also good. But the idea is that if I switch two pairs, then I stay the same. But if I only switch one pair, that one, or these, if I only switch one pair, then I go from one molecule to its enantiomer, if it is chiral, if it has an enantiomer to start with. Now I've gone through all these and replaced the bromine with a chlorine. So now this carbon has two chlorines on it. And so now my question is, are these the same? Okay? And so, again, I'll use my animation here to try to convince you that all of these drawings are now of the same thing. These are no longer enantiomers of each other. And so, in fact, because I can show you that these two mirror images are superimposable on each other, that they are not chiral. So how can I conceptualize the difference between this one and the last thing that I had? The difference is this compound has no chiral center. The chiral center is a carbon that has, typically a carbon, not always, typically a carbon that has 4 different substituents on one, I'll put brackets around carbon. A rough definition of a chiral center is having 4 different substituents on one carbon. Yes, there is chirality at other elements, but for now we'll focus on carbon. And so here, there's only 3 different things, H, F, and Cl, on the one carbon. So this is not a chiral center. But if I went back and put a bromine here, now there would be 4 different substituents on that compound, and so that would be a chiral center and would have an enantiomer.